asking the Chief Executive to read the notice and summons a meeting and take the members' attendance and apologies, please. John?
Mayor, in the absence of the Chief Executive, I'll take through the summons for you.
Thank you, Karen.
Members, you are hereby summoned to attend a special meeting of Derry City and Strabane District Council to be held remotely on Tuesday, the 25th of May, 2021 at 4 p.m. And to move through then, just in terms of attendance, Alderman Breslin, Alderman Devaney.
Here, Karen.
Alderman Hussey. Alderman Guy. Alderman Kerrigan.
Here, Karen.
Alderman McClintock.
Karen.
Alderman McCready.
Apologies.
Alderman Ramsey.
He may be in later, Karen, but couldn't make the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Wark.
Here, Karen.
Councillor Barr. Jason. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor Boyle.
Apologies, Karen. IT problems, I think.
Okay. Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw, Karen here.
Councillor Burke. Councillor Carr. Councillor Cusack.
Apologies.
Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Donnelly.
Shaw.
Councillor Doyle.
Here, Karen.
Councillor Duffy.
Shaw.
Councillor Jerkin. Councillor Edwards.
Karen.
Councillor Farrell.
He's running late, Karen. He'll be with us later on.
Okay. Councillor Ferguson.
Here, Karen.
Councillor Fleming.
And Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Gallagher.
And Shaw.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Heaney. Councillor Jackson.
Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Kelly.
Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Logue.
Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Maguire. Councillor McHugh.
Shaw, Karen.
Councillor McKeever.
Here, Karen.
Councillor McKinney.
He's hoping to join us a little later, Karen.
Okay. Councillor Mellon. Councillor Minnie.
Here, Karen.
Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Riley.
Here, Karen.
And Councillor Tierney.
Here, Karen.
And I was picking up that Councillor Barr Raymond has joined us.
And also Alderman Darren Guy as well, Karen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, item number 3 is a statement of remote meetings. I would like to remind everyone who is in remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing by the public and the media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council's protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting to be filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purposes of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council's privacy notice can be found on the Council website at derrystrabane.com. Karen, just before we move on, Councillor Jason Barr, Councillor Sean Harkin are both in attendance, and I think you've already got the apologies from Councillor Cusack.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, members, item number 4 is the declaration of members' interests. They can be shared now in the chat box or as they arise throughout the meeting. Item number 5 is Chairperson's business. And just before we do get underway, members, I would just like to extend a very warm welcome and thank you to all of our guest speakers today for agreeing to come and present the council. And I would particularly like to extend a warm welcome to the newly appointed Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, Gráinne Long. You're all very welcome. Advise members, all of the speakers will be provided with access at their designated slot on the agenda. And once their slot is ended, access will be removed. If your group, if you're not in line for the first speaker, you will be moved into a lobby until the meeting is your turn to address the meeting. The council's digital services officer will remove you into a lobby once we instruct them after this notice is read out, and we'll move you back in just when it crops up in the agenda. I would just ask that all of our guest speakers don't leave the meeting while you're in the lobby, as the officer will not be able to readmit you into the meeting if you've left. And I would also just advise all of our guest speakers to keep a wee eye on the broadcast live on the council's YouTube channel. That way you'll know when your slot is coming up, and we will just remind you also that the broadcast is about 10 to 20 seconds behind the meeting. So if we can just keep a wee eye on that, folks, it'll keep the running order smooth. So Paul Jackson, if you're online, can you please remove all of our guest speakers with the exception of the Northern Ireland Housing Executive speakers, please? And we will come to the guest speakers as they arise within the agenda. And Paul, can you just let me know whenever you've got that done, please? Paul, are we happy to go ahead now?
Hi, Brian. Yeah, it's everybody moved out. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yep. Thank you very much. So item 6 is to receive the representatives from the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. So I'll hand over to the newly appointed Chief Executive, and I've no doubt that we will have many more meetings, hopefully in a physical presence. But you're very welcome, and I just want to, on behalf of this council, wish you the very best of good luck in your new role. Over to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you for your time today. As you said, I'm newly appointed, came into the role on the 1st of April, and slowly but surely making my way around meetings such as this. So very pleased to be here today. And I'm just going to start with a little bit of an introduction, not to the Housing Executive, because you obviously know us very, very well, but just to talk a little bit about the year that's to come, our business year ahead. And then we'll go on to the specific issues that you've asked us to cover. And my colleague, Paul Isherwood, who's Director of Asset Management and for the Housing Executive, is also with us, and we'll cover off any questions. I'm really happy to cover a breadth of issues, so happy to do that. I will start though just with some of the numbers to remind everyone. I mean, the Housing Executive, as you know well, is an organisation of scale across Northern Ireland. So we've 84,000 homes, and that means we provide services directly to more than 170,000 people. And as I like to say on a regular basis, and we remind ourselves every day, that we provide homes to more than 40,000 children and young people. So I always like to remind our colleagues, keeping children and young people safe, warm and dry in their beds is a core part of our work, as is providing services to people and families and households at all ages across Northern Ireland. Our focus from a response maintenance side, so in other words, how we respond when repairs come up. We responded, for example, in the 1920 business year to 320,000 maintenance repairs, and that's on the response maintenance side. So that's about 52 million in spend, and again it shows you the scale of the organisation, and rightly so when you're talking about housing at the numbers that we are. But our customer base is much wider than that. Again in 1920 we spent 559 million on housing benefit. Again, a critical, and that's a Northern Ireland wide figure, but a critical income stream for people who really need it, and that's a core part of what we do. You will be very aware, given your roles as elected members, of the number of people on the waiting list, and I'm happy, of course, I will give you the figures for this district council, but across Northern Ireland, we currently have, or as at March of this year, we had 43,000 applicants on the waiting list, and that's a 13% increase. So very, very high levels of housing need and housing stress, which no doubt we will want to cover. And understandably, and perhaps unsurprisingly, we will continue to provide services through supporting people. Of many of you will be very aware of the Supporting People programme. That's housing support services to people who need it, and we work with and provide services to over 19,000 people across Northern Ireland, and working with over 500 community and voluntary sector organisations who are core partners of ours. We had, in the year just past, a very good year in terms of the social housing development programme, where we exceeded our new build targets, and again did that in partnership with our housing association partners, who I know you'll be meeting with after this portion of the meeting. But just as I say, just to focus on the kind of the scale of our work, you know, again, annual spend of 1.2 billion. And I mention those figures mainly because you can see the size of the programme, but also, and I imagine this is core and a key part of your focus from an economic development point of view. But, you know, we take our housing work really seriously, but we also take the economic and the social and the environmental impact that we have very seriously. So every penny and every pound that we spend, where we can, we want to spend it locally, and where we can, we want to ensure investment in local supply chains and in local jobs. And of course, you know, and skilling up and investing in skills locally is really important to us. So that may well come out in our conversation today, but it's really important to us that in every procurement contract where we can, we will embed social value through those contracts, and our planned maintenance programme coming forward over the next number of years will generate at least 50 apprenticeships a year, though in our view that's not good enough. We want to do much more than that, and again, happy to talk further about that. From an economic impact point of view, as I say, it's obvious where our impact ought to be and could be, and no doubt you'll want to hear and talk more about the social housing development programme. Just to cover local figures for Derry City and Strabane area in the year just past, so 2021, as I said, a good year, and a year that showed, for example, starts across 15 schemes, so 471 units started, and that represented actually 20% of the total social housing development programme across Northern Ireland. So again, I'm sure you'll be pleased to see that there's a huge area of focus on Derry City and Strabane District Council area, and again, some of those high profile schemes you'll be very well aware of. So again, housing association partners such as Radius and Habentag showing really high numbers, and great to see that level of investment in social housing in the council district area. So no doubt, again, you'll want to hear more about that. Just for the coming year, which has just started, and as you'll expect and appreciate, it does take some time for the social housing development programme to get going. In every year, we wait and await, and have thankfully now have received confirmation of the programme and the capital spend on the programme in this year. And we're working through, as the housing executive does every year, we work through the programme to understand those schemes that we can bring forward as quickly as possible, and that's the process we're in currently, and now looking at the development potential for Derry City and Strabane District Council in the year to come. And again, looks like we have a good year ahead, but nevertheless the challenges, no doubt, that we will cover over the course of the next few minutes. The challenges continue to be land and land availability, continue to be how we get the balance across social and affordable housing, and that mix of tenures, which again we've talked at length with you about, certainly before my time in post, but again ensuring those partnerships in place with housing associations, and which have been going from strength to strength. So that's where we're up to. And again, I'm happy to cover any more of that in more detail with you as you like as we go forward. You'll be glad to hear. I'm not going to talk at you for much longer. I did send you some slides just to give you some of the numbers, and happy to cover this in more detail for our improvement and maintenance program. And you can see, and these were the slides we sent in advance for this year, you'll see the scale of the improvement program that's ahead for households in the area. And again, really pleased to see a focus on maintenance and improvement at scale in this year. So again, we'll see in the year to come 3,655 homes, which will see improvements with an investment spend of 17.5 million, which again, very pleased to see. And that will be a very active programme, and there are a huge amount of challenges ahead. Anybody working in the construction industry or working in partnership with construction industry will know that there are challenges as we emerge from COVID-19, both in terms of skills on the ground, both in terms of supply and the cost of programs, which we may see increasing, but nevertheless, despite those challenges, we remain relatively positive with the programme to come, and again, very happy to continue to present to you over the course of the year where we do see those challenges coming forward. In terms of response maintenance, again, the numbers are in front of you for the year just past, and you'll see some of the jobs that we undertook, total number of priority jobs from the 1st of April of last year to the 31st of March of the year just past, 29,000 priority jobs which were undertaken. And I've also sent you the number of the numbers in relation to homelessness, both in terms of presenters and the increase. But again, happy to take questions. No doubt you'll want to ask me further about homelessness and placements in temporary accommodation in the city, and also what we expect to see in the year to come, because I think we are going to see a very difficult year, both in terms of the numbers of presenters as we come out of COVID, and also what we're going to see for those households who've been living in temporary accommodation for prolonged periods of time. So we have some real challenges ahead. But look, I think it's probably best if I stop there and allow you to ask me questions, and I'll bring Paul in also at some point, so that I'm not just talking at you.
Thank you for that, Grania. I have a list of speakers, as I'm sure you're probably aware, but just before I come to them, Karen, can you just record Tina Burke, Derek Hussey and Rory Farrell in attendance, please? And we'll come to the first speaker. Members, I'm going to ask, we have a lot of business to get through, so I'm going to ask if you can be brief in your questions, please. Alderman Morris Devaney, first of all.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in, and can I welcome everyone here from representation from the Housing Executive, and wish Grania well in her new position. It's good to see you here, and I've listened to you there doing your presentation. It's all good to hear about new builds. We need more of them, and as a rural councillor, I'm always crying for more housing within rural areas. Grania, you talked very much there about upgrades and enhancements of housing, and this is one of the problems. It's one of the issues that why this meeting was held today. I had, over this last number of months, have been contacted by a number of residents in relation to what they claimed was very, very poor quality work carried out in their houses. They were having kitchens upgraded and bathrooms upgraded, and some of them having wet rooms installed. And I have to say, Grania, I was staggered when I went out and saw some of the work that had been carried out in these houses. And I know, Grania, see, when you're getting your house done up, everybody's up and they're enjoying it and looking forward to it. But some of these have turned out to be a nightmare. And look, Grania, I have some photographs that I want to show you here. I've sent them on to committee that I want you to look. Now, I've picked two out of many here. And the first photographs, I think it's coming up. It was a wet room, was installed in the Donamana area. And I don't want to give out the address, but if you want to speak to me later on, I can give you the address. I don't want to give out names and addresses here. And this was a wet room, was installed in Donamana. And I'll just go through the photographs. Go to the next one. Next one. Next one. Now, those first three, that is a separate house, Grania. That first one, Grania, was a house where there are 2 registered disabled people in there, and they had got the wet room through their OT. And as you see from the standard of the work, it was very, very poor. And when I spoke to housing executive reps, they did say it was very, very poor. And I do feel these people have went through a nightmare because of this, because they're 2 disabled people. This wet room was put in especially to help them with their disability. And you see the poor maintenance of the work. And the first time they tried to shower on it, as you see with the gaps in it, the water ran down through the ceiling, down in through the electrics. Now, the second one, the photograph you're looking at now is a house in Mahermason, another wet room installed as well. And just go on to the next photograph. And really, look at the fan and the way it was finished. That was the finished detail there that was left for the tenant. And go on to the next one, please. And this was the wet room where it came out onto the tiles, and very much there was a health and safety issue there. There was no trim put on there, and the person was disabled. And to me, that was a really health and safety issue. Go ahead to the next one. This was in the same house where the new toilet and everything was fitted. They fitted the old cistern, Grania, and as you see on the left-hand side, the overflow pipe never was connected up to the outside. So it wasn't. Go ahead to the next one.
Alderman Devaney, I'm going to have to rush you.
Aye. Look,
I get on here, and this is nothing to do with me.
who's that? Look, what I have to say is, Grania, I'm really concerned about the standard of work that's being carried out here. And these tenants feel they have no voice but to come to ourselves as public representatives. And I would ask that someone comes out here and meets with me on site with a couple of these residents. I have one more issue in Donaghmana where people, Grania, were without water and without cooking facilities for over 5 weeks. In an area called Stony Falls, and I did mention this at a previous meeting, and I would like, Grania, that some people come back to me, because I have a question here, and I'm very quick. How is these projects monitored and supervised as the work goes on, and how is it determined the standard of work? And the other thing, in and around the refurbishment grant, £50 for work like this is totally nonsense. But I appreciate.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Thank you.
Back to me privately.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Grania, we're going to take a batch of questions and then we'll come back to these, all right? So Councillor Paul Gallagher is next.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting us in. How's it going, Grania? Welcome to the real world, the big jobs. I hope you have every success in it.
Thank you.
I have a couple of quick issues I would like to raise, and the previous speaker may have mentioned some. There is a scheme at the minute going on in Donaghmana area, and it's a kitchen and bathroom scheme. I've been getting some issues where the contractors land, people are not sure what they're getting done, and then they're finding out it's only their kitchen getting done and not their bathroom, and then they've been looking through and saying, here, my house is 50 years old. I've never had any repairs done to my bathroom. Why am I not in a scheme? And it becomes difficult at that process. You make some investigations and you're informed that the bathrooms may be in a scheme in 2023, and you go back to the tenants, and the tenants saying, there's no guarantee that'll happen, but why is someone else's property getting a bathroom? My property is over 50. It's twice that the recommended 25 years of upgrade, and they're giving this, and they can't understand why they've been overlooked first time. And because there is a possible scheme in 2023, it seems they get put on the long finger, and they just think it's very unfair on their basis, having to wait. And then there is the potential of some things like working out of sequence. That if you do come across someone who the perception is getting treated unfairly, it could be remedied, and the possibility of making that happen, in that situation. So I may speak to you later on it privately on a separate one. Some issues that that you touched on, just around some issues from contractors who work for the housing executive, and we've seen COVID and we've seen Brexit, and they're saying there's been a sharp rise in costings and materials and access and materials, but that some of the schemes, the costings have remained the same. For example, the affordable warmth, etc., etc. Is there any plans for the housing executive to take into consideration COVID and Brexit and revise some of the costings? And possibly, and I don't know if it's related or not, but some of the stuff that photographs we've previously seen may not and should not be happening, and as cost making these things happen. But I'm sure on the previous photographs there has to be some sort of sign off by the grants office on some of these properties. So I think there is room for catch up on those, especially those stark feelings, But thank you, Annette.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Doyle, Emmett Doyle.
Thanks, Mayor, for letting me in. You're very welcome, Grania, and Paul, and of course Eddie, who is probably tortured by us all, but I have to say he does a fantastic job. I have three main issues, Grania, and I'll keep the photos to the last one. I suppose primarily the big issue that we're facing down here at the moment is around temporary accommodation. I'm glad you mentioned it, with regards to the use of B&Bs and such. And I'd like your take on that, because I'm sure you're aware Eddie has escalated a number of cases from myself and other elected representatives around fears in specific areas of the city about crime and whatnot. And we're trying to deal with that on a multi-agency basis with police and everything else. And I know that for a lot of cases your hands are tied. But what we're hearing is that actually a lot of these cases come from the Belfast and Ballymena offices. And it's my view that they shouldn't, but it would be good to hear your views on it. The other aspect of it is, I suppose, going from what Mara said, is the sign-off in some of the work that's going on with regards contractors. I know everybody's trying to make a living and get on with their work throughout COVID and the difficulties arising from it, but I've certainly come across a number of cases where it genuinely looked like someone came out of nursery and completed work on someone's family home. Now I don't have any photos about that, but I do have photos of a property a lady in my DEA came to me with about 3 months ago, and with Eddie's help, in fairness, we did get it addressed. But if Nuala could bring up the photos, Nuala, the three I sent, this is a property that a lady had been living on with a young child. She had been told, sorry, 2 young children. She had been told that there was no damp in the property, that actually all of these problems that you'll see, and I'm hoping you're not eating your dinner for the next photo anywhere, she was basically told that's because there's 3 people in a 1-bed property all breathing at the same time. Now, I don't know what properties you get where you don't have to breathe, but this is the state of one of the properties. As you saw in the previous picture, there were mushrooms growing out of her wall. This is obviously the back of one of her family photos that wasn't in the property very long. She was actually decanted into this property while work on her own was done.
Councillor Doyle, can I ask you to be quick, please?
Yes, certainly, Mayor. Thank you. And that aspect of things is totally unacceptable. I find a lot of times, and I'm sure members do as well, either rightly or wrongly, because I'm not an expert, that people are told it's not damp, it's condensation. I mean, I don't think you could call that condensation. So it's one of the big issues we have. And I wonder if you would mind addressing how that got to that stage, not specifically, but obviously it's unacceptable. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor, for bringing me in, and good luck on you in your role. I'll not count back the number of years that we were in the Students' Union together, but fair play to you for taking on this role in the Housing Executive, and best of luck in it. In relation to the questions I have, some of them have been touched on already by other aldermen and councillors in relation to the likes of the temporary accommodation and the difficulties that we have in relation to the supply of that across the north, and then in turn the placing of people in places that are outside of their own areas and the issues attached with that. There's also concerns about the lack of affordable housing, obviously across the north, but specifically in the sector where people have a disability, and the concerns that there isn't enough housing stock available for people who have complex needs, and there is worrying figures showing the number of people with a disability who don't have suitable housing available to them. Councillor Doyle and Alderman Devaney have touched on the issue of damp in the Housing Executive stock, and that is something that is of significant concern to us as well. Some of our MLAs have been working on similar casework, and there is issues in relation to the local housing allowance, where people's rent is actually below what they are being asked to get from their landlord. So there are issues and discrepancies there as well that you might be able to address. But I think that if you look at the issues that are happening, it's about the investment that the housing executives can make into making their own stock better, and aligned with that in the waterside area in particular. There's been a long running issue about the investment in the triangle area. Eddie again will know that well from various correspondence that we've had with him on the issue. So any update you can give the residents of the triangle in relation to that scheme would be appreciated here today as well. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Grania.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Grania, is there anything that you wish to address in the first four speakers?
Yeah, I mean, yes, very happy to, and very happy to cover it, and I'm sure we'll want to bring in colleagues as well. I mean, I suppose first of all, to be really clear, the issue of standards, both in our existing properties and standards of improvements, is really, really important to us. So you can take as read that I take what you've said seriously. We will come back to you on an individual basis, and in terms of we will come back to you on each of those individual issues. So take that as absolutely read. And while I'm always happy to come to this council and meet with you, frankly, you shouldn't have to. It shouldn't require this. So I take that also as read, and I'm happy to come back to you at any point further on this. I'm going to ask Paul to talk you through the sign off so that you can hear what the process that we go through when we as we manage those contracts, and as we so Paul will cover that, and we'll cover the issues of how we go about managing contracts and ensuring standards across those properties. I suppose one thing that I would say is, yes, the cost of materials and the cost of labour is increasing, but I wouldn't want anyone to assume that we think that that's good enough for substandard work, so just to be very clear on that, and I would entirely separate out the two. I'll ask Paul to come back on the issues in relation to those properties. I just want to cover the issue of temporary accommodation, and as you know, pre-COVID, both the scale and the nature of demand for homeless accommodation and for accommodation more generally was already high. We have major structural issues, you know that as well as I do, between demand and supply across Northern Ireland, but it is acute in the Derry and Strabane council area. COVID then hit, and as you know, while we saw the number of people coming forward as homeless, while that slowly reduced over time, what we did see, understandably, as the pandemic hit, was a massive increase in placements in temporary accommodation. To be very clear, it is our view that people should only be placed in temporary accommodation for the purposes for which it's meant, in other words, for temporary periods. And what we've now found ourselves in is a situation where people have been in temporary accommodation for prolonged periods, and nobody in the housing executive views that as acceptable. We don't, that's not why we go to work. That's not what we want to do. So it's always our intention that a temporary accommodation should be appropriate, the standard should be appropriate, and where we can move people on sustainably and to the right kind of to the right kind of hopefully permanent accommodation, we will do that. But we are face a really, really difficult period as we emerge from COVID, and we are struggling to find suitable accommodation to move people into. So that is the main challenge ahead. We have a number of programs that we are looking to in this year to try and increase the more secure permanent forms of accommodation. And as you'll be aware, we've also increased some supply of temporary accommodation in the city and more broadly. But as I say, we don't want to see prolonged periods and prolonged spells for households, particularly those with children and those with additional needs. And just I can say to you, on the record today, it is my view that we should not be placing families in bed and breakfast accommodation for a prolonged period. I want to move us away from that as quickly as I can. I have the support of my colleagues across the organisation in relation to that. So that is an absolute priority. But it will not be, we won't achieve that quickly, unfortunately, because of where we found ourselves with the lack of accommodation available. But just to say, it is an absolute priority of ours and a priority ahead. And it is also, I have to say, the need to bring forward more social housing more quickly, I think is something that we would all agree on and something that is agreed on across the sector. I'm going to ask Paul to come in at this point just so he can talk you through the approvals on individual homes, and I'm happy to come back on further questions. Paul.
Okay, afternoon all. I'm Paul Ashwood, I'm the Director of Asset Management. It's my team that is responsible for the improvement programme. As Grania said, all our schemes are allocated project managers and clerk of works to inspect the works. So I can't, seeing those photos do considerably disturb me, because that shouldn't be happening. And Councillor Gallagher and Alderman Devaney, I'm happy to come up to the area and actually go and have a look at these properties with you if that suits. Happy to do that. In respect of this, as I say, the project managers and the clerk of works, the contractors should also have supervisors on sites as well. So in respect of the processes, is that there should be sufficient enough inspection through the contractor and through our own team, and ultimately nothing should actually get paid until everything. And as I say, I wouldn't expect that any of that should have passed any of our inspections. And as I say, I'm happy to come up and meet and actually discuss the projects and speak to the tenants just to see what actually had happened in that circumstance. In respect of the materials, yes, we have had a number of inquiries very recently. We've commissioned a piece of work for ourselves, working with the Constructors Employers Federation, because we've seen considerable price increases in respect of since Brexit, and that any materials are very difficult to come across at the moment, and we're seeing price increases of up to 50%. So my team are actually doing a piece of work on that at the moment, and we've asked contractors to submit information to us, and we're taking that forward on a contract by contract basis. Okay.
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that. We'll move on to our next batch of speakers. And the first is Alderman Hollery McClintock.
Thanks, Chair, and welcome Grania and Paul to the meeting, and Eddie, of course, who's like an old friend as well. I'm not well in anything that the other speakers have already raised, except that maybe just to mention, Grania, whenever people talk about temporary accommodation and you've mentioned families, I want to just also just draw attention to the number of young males who are in homeless accommodation, and particularly the issues that can cause for other people. Just sort of bringing that one to the fore. I just want to raise one issue as well, and it's on the whole maintenance that has the work that has been done in particular areas. Out in Caw, for instance, they've had a problem with overflow pipes in houses not being actually put to flow out of the house. So the water actually, if there's a flood, the water will flow inside the house. And I think the community worker in CAW has, I think, brought this to the attention probably of Eddie, who is maybe now aware of it. But I mean, it's a massive issue, something as simple as that, which could cause untold damage to properties. The other thing just that I wanted to raise, if I could briefly, is it's great that there is a focus on new development. But sometimes I think our older estates are forgotten. And I just wonder about whether there is a lack of investment in the Northwest particularly. And I'm thinking of areas like the like of Milltown Few, and Martin, Councillor Riley has already mentioned the Triangle was the other one was in my head as well. Areas that are quite depressing. I mean, Milltown Few, it's an area that it's difficult to for anybody to have pride in their houses, even the outside appearance of the houses, and it seems to be one of those forgotten estates. So I just want to sort of say, I think it's important for the whole well-being of people that the aesthetics on the outside, as well as the boilers and whatever, are replaced, but some of the conditions outside are absolutely very poor. We do walkabouts in these areas, but we don't see an awful lot of improvement. So that's really all the points I want to make, because the rest I think have been addressed by other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Councillor Sean Harkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity to, well, I want to thank the housing executive officials for the opportunity to come in and address us today and address these questions. Some of what has already been heard is very useful. And I think that, look, no matter how critical the questions are today, you probably won't find a council across the north that is more supportive of the housing executive than the Derry and Strabane district one. Which is we want to see the housing executive succeed. We want to see it lead the way in building all the houses that we need right across the north. And you know, I think I and others here are committed to helping you do that. What Grania said at the start was alarming in terms of the increased number of people, up by 13% on the waiting list. And I suppose my question is more general. It's just you know, there's tremendous pressure on the housing executive to renovate existing stock, and there's also massive pressure to build new houses. And I would like to get your view on the challenges with that, because that just seems, given the kind of limited budget that the housing executive has, how does that play out? Because look, I do hear directly from constituents, people complain sometimes about the work. It's not done up to a good enough standard, or it's not being done fast enough. And I know the vast majority of workers in the housing executive do a brilliant job, but I want to get an idea of what are the financial pressures on renovating existing stock, wherever it is, here in Derry or anywhere else, alongside with the massive pressure to build new houses, because as you said, there's 43,000 people now on the waiting list. That's an incredible number. You know, all them people that are in temporary accommodation want out of it into something permanent. And, you know, there's been an increase of 13%. So could you give us a sense of just what that pressure actually looks like, and how that impacts then, you know, especially some of these problems that existing residents are having with getting their places renovated to the standard that we would all like to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Before we go to the next speaker, can I just point out that Councillor Duffy has declared an interest as she works for an organisation which is funded by the Housing Executive. Alderman Darren Guy.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, congratulations, Grania, on the post, and welcome Eddie and Paul to the meeting as well. Just want to ask, and it goes back to the temporary accommodation issue, but it's mainly in regards to B&Bs about the town that have taken on people from other areas. Now, I know that people from this town are actually taken to the likes of Ballymena, Belfast, Newton Stewart in the past, which I think is stopped now up there. But my point is that there is other B&Bs who are providing such services they take in people who are suffering from homelessness. And I know that ideally it's not perfect for families, young families that are in that situation. However, for individuals, these B&Bs feel that they're being overlooked by the housing executive, and that they're not getting a fair chance to take these people in. They provide additional services, which would be of help to some of the clients that are being taken in, and they just wonder, is their acceptance criteria too stringent, because they are quite tight on any convictions and stuff like that there, which the person may have. And I'll move on to just, I agree with Hilary, what Hilary says, and basically both the wider Tully Alley and Curry Nearin areas have been badly neglected over the years, not for works carried out in houses or anything like that, but the actual areas itself. And as Hilary says, it's actually quite depressing state. But thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. Councillor Patricia Logue.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Peter, or sorry, Paul, Grania and Eddie for attending this meeting today, and a special welcome to Grania. I know our party has a meeting penciled in with yourself, Grania, and we will be discussing a lot of issues that you have mentioned in your opening remarks. I'm afraid I done a couple hours work on a notice of motion that maybe this meeting is not totally dealing with today, but I do know if I had been aware that we could have brought on photographs and things, you know, I think that should have been maybe sent out to members. I've never known that they happened before. But Grania, you said, you know, it shouldn't take a meeting like this to have those things addressed. And to be honest with you, I would have to agree with you. And I work, and members of our party work very well with the local office. However, going forward, I would like to see, you know, instead of councillors having to chase around who the project managers are, and what planned maintenance is on for that year, and exactly who's going to get it, and you know, because I know there is issues with maybe heating upgrades or kitchen upgrades. If residents have received an upgrade within a certain amount of time, then they're not going to get it in the plant maintenance, and that does cause some confusion and annoyance. But as well as that, I would like to see that if councillors for the respective DAs would get notification of schemes that are planned for their areas, and the contact details maybe for the contractor and the project manager, I do think that would be most helpful. I suppose going forward, there are a lot of issues with damp, mold, etc. And we, as a party, have been meeting with the housing executive on this for well over a year now. And I suppose it would be remiss of me not to mention the piece of work that was carried out by the housing executive on the cavity wall insulation. And we know that there was an initial report done in 2014, which showed significant failings of the cavity wall, and that led to another report being commissioned, or sorry, a survey being commissioned in 2017, with a report coming out in 2019 with the findings. And I know there was over 825 housing executive homes carried out, and over 100 private. And out of that, I think maybe 78% were found to have cavity wall issues failing within their properties. And that could have been due to just the age of the cavity wall, or not the cavity wall, the cavity wall insulation, and the actual people who installed it. It wasn't installed right. However, I am really, really pleased to see that the Housing Executive now have come up with an action plan. I know it was out for consultation there, and it finished on the 31st of March, I believe. And there are plans to address a lot of the cavity wall insulation issues within our council district. And I'm really
Councillor
glad.
Lowe, can I ask you to bring your remarks to a close, please?
And I am really glad to hear that. But I really think that this report needs to be taken on board by the housing associations too as well, because they have a lot of homes too within the areas. But listen, Gordon, I look forward to meeting you at our planned meeting where we can go over issues in a lot more detail. But thanks for attending the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Ron, if I could just hand back to yourselves to address those issues, but I would just ask that Councillor Gallagher raised about those being left out of scheme upgrades that I don't think that you addressed in your first responses, so if you wouldn't mind including that for me, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yes, and just
sorry, Grania, I've just PM Paul, so I went a different route, Mayor. Sorry, but
no worries, that's fine. As long as it's addressed for you, Councillor Gallagher, I'm happy enough.
I'm happy enough.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. One less for me. So just to cover on those issues, I mean, and I didn't quite cover it in the last round. So just to be clear on temporary accommodation, again, on out of area placements. I mean, I spoke to the team today, for example, on placements, you know, from outside the council area. And again, we are reducing that right down as quickly as we can. Same points I made earlier. It's not our view that we should be placing people out of area unless we absolutely have to. So it will only be in exceptional circumstances. COVID-19 pandemic was exceptional, and unfortunately we did have to do it from time to time. It's not our view that we want to do that as established practice. So we've reduced that right down, and we will only continue. We will only do that where it's absolutely necessary. And there is no other alternative. I mean, I don't have an immediate comment on the point about B&Bs getting overlooked. I have to say we are always struggling to find appropriate accommodation. So if there are, sources of accommodation who feel they want to make contact with us, well then they really should. Because as I say, if they are forms of temporary accommodation that we feel we can use, then I'm sure we would want to do that. I'll leave the issue of overflow pipes to Paul. He may well to comment on that, but certainly we would want to follow up with you on each of those issues. So again, no issues there. I mean, the kind of the bigger question, or the exam question of the challenges and the balance between existing stock and new build. This is a challenge for every housing organisation I know who has existing stock and are also trying to invest in the stock that they have, while also the kind of their new stock. And you know, we've said for some time as an organisation that our ability to add to new supply, you know, by building new homes is certainly something we would want to return to. We want to do that also to add to, rather than certainly not replace the supply coming forward from housing associations, because quite frankly, we all need to be building and building at scale. Everybody working in housing knows the challenges and sees the numbers. In terms of our existing stock, we have a requirement or an investment challenge of about 3 billion in this decade. And that's purely to maintain and upgrade our existing stock. But we need to spend more in relation to building safety, and we need to spend more in relation to energy efficiency, given the need to decarbonise our stock rapidly. So we have a huge challenge in terms of investment in our existing homes. And obviously, ultimately, that's part of, you know, a core rationale behind the Minister's statement towards the end of last year, looking to enable the housing executive to borrow. And I know obviously you've had significant discussions at a council level on that point, but certainly the ability to borrow in order to invest in our stock, and the ability to borrow in terms of new building and adding to new supply is critical and will be a priority for us. The nature of that borrowing, that's for another debate, and it's outside of any decision that I would take, but certainly from my perspective, enabling us to do both of those things would make a massive difference to our existing tenants in those homes, but also to future tenants, and that's fundamentally what we're trying to achieve. And the source of that borrowing is for others to decide. I will absolutely follow up with officials and officers at council with key lines of contact for the housing executive across the organisation, so that you have those. And as I say, I know working very closely with Eddie and his team, and we have a terrific team of staff on the ground across the council area. But I will certainly make sure that you have all of the contacts that you need. And I know as elected members, housing is a critical issue. It comes up time and time again for constituents, that you have access to the people that you need within the housing executive. So I'm really very happy to follow up and make sure you have all the contacts that you need. Very happy to come back at a further point if you want me to, of course. And I will also just ask Paul to comment a little on the cavity wall issue, Mayor, if you're happy that we do that.
Yep, just to bring you up, again, had a few conversations with council very recently on another scheme, but just as regards to the cavity wall action plan, yes, the consultation did conclude at the end of March. My team were just considering the responses, and we will bring a full detailed action plan forward, probably sort of towards the middle end of summer, and then that will sort of direct where the organisation will be going. As Gráinne said, a lot of this will also be tied into our pursuit of the carbon zero target by 2050. So a lot of work will be undertaken over the coming years. But again, it's just looking at the funding that is available to that, because that is one of the critical areas as well. Okay.
Thank you both very much for that. Next speaker is Councillor Rachel Ferguson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Gráinne, Eddie and Paul, for today. I'll keep it short and sweet. Gráinne, I wanted to know, when you are in conversations with the likes of the rural housing on what type of properties to build, whether it's an entire district's kind of list taken into consideration, or that area in particular. For example, and I know some of the villages I have are highly sought after. Families come back and stay, but it seems to be, when new houses are coming in, it's 1 bed and 2 beds. And what I have is a list as long as my arm of families needing 3 beds and 4 beds. I have a young family, 5 children, 4 of them with special educational needs, who have to privately rent at within the area, and cannot get access to a house at all. And it is very much, because the areas are sought after and people stay there and they make their homes and they want to come back. So I was wondering whether that was something in which was taken into consideration, because housing's needed across the whole district. I fully understand that, but there does seem to be, no matter how many points you have in certain areas, you're not going to get a house or access to those 3 bed and 4 bedrooms. And the other issue was the B&Bs, the consideration with young mothers. I've had one young mother who was pregnant and a toddler offered a B&B, which she was told, is a party central, and that she would rather have stayed on a sofa, in a family's home than that. So just kind of wanted to ask you about that. But thank you again, and Eddie and the team have been brilliant, and I really appreciate at least taking the time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Alderman Hussey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Derek.
Sorry, Mayor. Thank you. Connectivity difficulties here. Thank you for the presentation, and can I concur with many of the remarks that have been made by others with regard to quality assurance. I think is the issue. I know when I follow up on schemes with electors in my own area, when I'm judging it, I judge it in a very simple way. Would I accept that level of work in my own home? And, you know, I often wonder, when officers are assessing, do they do on exactly the same basis? Would they accept the quality of work in their own home? I do have to say, on a personal level within my own area, I have absolutely no issues with the patch manager, who tries to do a fantastic job. But when outside contractors come in on the various schemes, it is extremely frustrating. I'm not going to go into individual cases. I have one that's been followed through in a formal complaint at the moment. So I'll just leave it at that. But I think it is something that the Housing Executive have to address, the issue of internal quality assurance of the work. With regard to future settlements, would it be the intention of the Northern Ireland Housing Executive to encourage development, social housing development, beyond the various settlements throughout our council area? I'm mindful of, you know, there used to be, you had the 8 house, 10 house, 12 house, small developments, social housing within the rural areas. And in those areas, there are very, very often not the social problems that exist elsewhere. So I would like to think that the Housing Executive would be encouraging that sort of ongoing development. And finally, this particular one, Mayor, when I say this, I am not getting at any particular officers, because the response from Housing Executive personnel is absolutely fantastic. But I know there are those in the community who have concerns with regard to community balance within staffing within the Housing Executive. And I know that there have been freedom of information requests on that particular issue. I'm not sure if Grania is aware of that, but would Grania have any concerns on that, and would she agree that it's something that needs to be addressed going forward? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Councillor Gary Donnelly.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Paul, Eddie, and Grania. I just have some concerns. I get the impression from my dealings with the Housing Executive that that sometimes the staff, the caseloads are getting heavier, because what I'm noticing is an awful lot of target dates are being missed. I even find it more difficult to get through the executive, and it's taking longer periods for staff to get back. Now, that is not a criticism of staff, because when you talk to them, it's very clear that they're up their eyes in it. And I'm just concerned that is the executive, has it got sufficient staff and resources? Now, obviously, we have the whole issue with COVID and Brexit and that, which is added to it. But two sort of things that I want to sort of ask is regarding sort of legacy or historic issues. Say, it was mentioned earlier about the cavity wall and that. Would there be a duty of care to maybe some people who have bought their homes, which were former Housing Executive homes, if some of these faults come out? Is there a duty of care from the executive to sort of compensate or try to put it right? And one of the other things that I have concerns with is the no detriment. Is that when people are when they have their FDA, because there is some individuals who I think are exploiting that, who are and okay, there's all the issues with mental health and addictions and that, but I get the distinct impression that there is some people who could break 7, 8, 9, 10 times, knowing that there will be no sanctions. So I'd just like to know what your thoughts are on that. And again, I want to put on record my appreciation of the tremendous work that the Housing Executive staff do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Rory Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome, Grania. And good to see Eddie again. His team do a fantastic job across this city and district. I've got two questions. The first is in relation to what I understand are specific job roles in Belfast. I understand that there are social work specialists who deal specifically with tenants and applicants with extreme vulnerabilities, including mental health difficulties. Are there plans to introduce similar job roles across Derry and Strabane? And the second question touches on something we've already discussed about hostels and B&Bs and the lack of adequate accommodation. Is there any update on the business case for the emergency accommodation project that we understand has been submitted?
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me on. Mayor, just raising a couple of issues there and regards to there are certain issues there, and I do welcome the House and Executive members in, but it's in regards to as Councillor Logue has stated there, it is very beneficial if we can get a bit of information as to what schemes are out. But there's a wee bit of variance there in some of the schemes. I mean, an individual contacted me who requires a replacement of the back door, but he's just been told there's a scheme coming out now in the next couple of months, and it's not happening until such time as you'll get it through the scheme, but we're not going to put it in as a general repair, whereby, if that dwelling house needs that, either that door or that window or something replaced there and then, should it not be put through, or do we just have to wait for a scheme? There doesn't seem to be a bit of flexibility there. Further in that there, Mayor, I do welcome comments there. Welcome the comments by Alderman Hussey there as well. We're in the same DEA, but we're dealing with the same patch managers, and no issue with them at all. They're very good at coming back to you as well, but it's other issues that were raised there. And agree with Councillor Ferguson's remarks there. I know there's a lot of it's one bed places now, and for single persons now as seems to be the main requirement, but there are requirements for families. And I had a married couple with 3 daughters and 1 son. And effectively they were looking for a 4-bedroom accommodation, and that's very, very difficult to get anywhere in the housing executive or even with the private housing associations. They're not building them, and so you're really the only option for the likes of them is trying to go to private landlords. And even another one whereby it's a wee bit out there, but it was the flexibility of trying to get trying to look at other schemes. I had a family whereby they were housing executive tenants, but again, the grandparents, if you want to put it, were housing executive tenants, and there was the potential of the grandparents needed care, whereby if it had been taken on board, the possibility of adding an extra bedroom to the grandparents' home could have resulted in the 2 families merging into one dwelling house. That was just ruled out from the start, and it would have freed up a second dwelling house. So there's wee things like that. There doesn't seem to be the outside the box thinking. If it's just, it can be very much black and white. Just there's not much looking to try to, well, maybe this would be a better job of looking at it. But in regards to a question, Mayor, it's more so in regards to some of the work that Alderman Devaney had raised at the very start of the issue. It's the contractors. Are there any contractors? Are the housing executive having issues with contractors? And are there any contractors that maybe won't be renewed or have their been kept on the list, or are they seeking to get additional contractors who are willing to price or put in a quote for their work, or in regards to these third-party contractors? Because sometimes the work can be grand, but there are, and I suppose that's it, we're only being contacted when there's issues with the work, rather than look at the good job that's been done here. But there's more and more, and it has been stated by, as you can see there, Mayor, the amount of ones there that have raised issues about work. And again, I think it was Councillor Gallagher at the very start there had raised, I mean, any building contractor you're chatting out there, Mayor, they're lamenting and complaining about the price of materials have rocketed this last 6 months and due to COVID and everything else. And again, I know there used to be grants there through the housing executive and all the rest, and they were very rigid. They stayed very put. There used to be a replacement dwelling grant and it was 31,500. And maybe that's totally done away with now, but that's what it was 20 years ago. It was 31,500. And again, I'm working with one person that's still able to qualify for that, and it's still 31,500. And I can tell you, it'll take a brave bit more on top of that to put up a very modest house. You know, so I'm just wondering, is there any look into? I know the budget's tight, and I know there's no blank check out there, but it's just those couple of points, Mayor. But thank you very much for allowing me in. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. Grania, I'm going to push my luck a wee bit here. I have one final speaker, and I'm going to throw this on with this batch. So it's Councillor Sean Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be straight to the point. It's a follow-up from a previous contributor, Councillor Riley, my colleague. He asked about the present redevelopment of the Triangle area, but I don't think there was any comment made on it. But I, like Councillor Riley, and probably all other city councillors, have been getting contacted by residents about this, so I would appreciate if there was an update. Thank you very much, Grania.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. Grania, I'll hand over to yourselves if you want to try and address some of those issues there.
I will. I'll address as many as I can. I'll hand over to Paul to address a couple, and then we may follow up with some, if that's okay, after the meeting, those that I can't immediately answer. I think, and again, covered a really wide range of issues, and I think generally speaking, you can see the scale of some of the issues that, you know, are kind of broad housing issues. Look, just to say, I completely agree with the point on quality assurance, and just to say to councillor who raised it, yes, that's exactly the principle that we would apply. You know, we have very clear quality assurance guidelines within the organisation. We apply the same principle, you know, that there is a standard that we expect to see, and where we don't see that standard, action has to be taken. So that's why we're taking this seriously. We will follow up, and we will certainly want to talk about those individual cases. So you have my absolute assurance on that. On the issue of rural housing, again, a very, very, very big issue, and we have a rural housing forum made up of tenants from across areas across Northern Ireland in relation to rural housing, and I met with them 2 weeks ago, and the issues that you raised, Councillor, came up time and again: family accommodation, lack of family accommodation, areas of low demand, and pockets of high demand, and actually the waiting list not necessarily reflecting need, because actually a perception out there that, well, if I'm not going to get a home, will I put my name on the list? As a result, I mean, we have had a rural housing team in place for a number of years, and within the housing executive, and we undertake rural needs assessments on a fairly regular basis. And what those rural needs assessments are telling us is that there's more work needed to encourage people to come forward actually and state that they have a need. Although that's just one solution. We also undertake land appraisal, so we're fairly consistently looking at land availability in rural areas. But I have to say, there's no swift solution to that. There are some things that we could do, the housing executive ourselves, if we were able to build and if we were able to acquire properties, which we certainly would want to look at in the future. But again, we're in the process of developing a new rural housing strategy, and look, all I can say is I completely agree that the kind of the balance between demand and supply in rural areas, particularly around family accommodation, is acute, and it is a priority for us. And always happy to come back to that point in more detail. On the issue of children in bed and breakfast accommodation, I said it earlier, you know, personal view of mine, my own view, that children should not be placed in bed and breakfast accommodation unless for very short periods, and we would certainly want to be moving away from that as quickly as we can. So fully agree with that point. I don't have I will follow up with an update on the emergency accommodation project. I'm aware of the business case in question. I haven't had an update more recently than April, so I'm happy to follow up in due course on that one, and also on the issue of triangle development, which I know is a really, really critical issue to the tenants in the triangle development, but also to the leaseholders, and I have been fully briefed. I don't have, unfortunately, a huge update on that more recently, but again, I will stay in contact. I'm very happy to stay in constant contact with you on it, because it is a priority for me, and I'm sure a priority for councillors, as you've raised. So again, I will follow up on that point. I suppose I wanted to touch on the issue of caseloads, and this, you're not the only council to raise this issue. The housing executive, like many organisations providing public services, had to move swiftly and quickly to move staff to online and remote working. We have had some issues with our telephony over the course of the pandemic. We have now rectified that, but certainly for a period of time, we were receiving, again, anecdotal comments from councillors and from elected members that it was taking longer to get through. So I will say to you what I've said to others, which is we will follow up. We will make sure that you have contacts that you need to be able to manage your caseloads. But certainly we're working with our teams very proactively to make sure that as we return now, slowly but surely and safely to the workplace, that we manage that transition really well. But I absolutely take those points. And I suppose the final point I would make around community balance within staffing, that is a absolutely critical priority for this organisation. The Housing Executive was founded on the principles of fairness, and it lives by those values today and takes them extremely seriously. So where there are issues, either perceived or real, across the organisation in terms of community balance, we will take that as an absolute priority. So you have my word on that one. And again, very happy to speak in person to people on those issues if they wish to raise it with me. And I might just ask Paul then to just come back on the point about cavity wall, because it did come up a couple of times, and we'll probably leave it there. Thank you.
Paul, I think you're on mute there, Paul.
That's the saying of 2020, 2021, isn't it? Just on the issue of the cavity wall action plan is only to address the housing executive stock, and there is no plans from the landlord side to look at any private sector housing in that sense. In respect of the query over the door, usually what tends to happen in respect of doors, if doors need immediately replacing, they'll be replaced under response maintenance. But if it can wait and can have a hold and repair undertaken for doors, they'll then be moved into the scheme. So that may have what's probably happened in that scenario. In respect of contractors, the more contractors we can get, the better. We're constantly looking for new contractors to do work. We have a phenomenal amount of work that we need to deliver. Our budget across the whole of the housing executive stock this year is 217 million. So we've got enough work for everybody. And if people are interested in our works, our adverts are often placed in the local e-tenders portal. So if any contractors are interested in working for us, if they want to be directed to there, that's where all our work streams come through. So again, the more contractors for us, the better, really.
Thank you for that. Folks, just before I let you go, Councillor Farrell there has a comment in the chat box. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's just around the issue of social worker specialists in Belfast, but not in Derry.
Yes, again, I will very happy to follow up on that point. Again, I'm not. What I would say is I'm not aware of any issues where we would have groups or teams of staff, I suppose, differences in discipline from one city to the other. So let me follow up on that. I'm not really aware of the issue, but certainly very happy to come back to you on it.
Thank you very much for that, Grania. You'll be happy to hear no further indicated speakers. Once again, just to thank yourself, Paul and Eddie, for your attendance here and your very detailed responses to all of the very tricky questions. And I'm sure members appreciate that and the follow-up correspondence that you have committed to doing. But once again, just thank you very much for coming, and good luck, Grania, in your new role. And I'm no doubt you'll be supported well by all of the teams around you. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Leslie Ann, if you can remove the Housing Executive deputation and bring in the Apex Housing Association deputation from the lobby, please. And members, if you just appreciate that, can take a wee minute or so to do, so just bear with us, please. Okay, members, thank you, Leslie Ann, for that. Much appreciated. We're now with our Apex deputation, so I'll hand over to yourselves first and foremost. And you're all very welcome, and thank you very much for your attendance at today's meeting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors for the invitation today. I'm Sheena McCallion, Chief Executive of Apex, and my colleagues Kevin Butler, Director of Property Services, and Donna Matthewson, who's Director of Housing, have joined me. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a bit of background in regards to the services we deliver, particularly around maintenance and repairs, and answer any questions that you may have. And if there's any questions that we can't answer today, we will come back to you in regard to that. So in terms of sharing the presentation, can I just check if the presentation has been shared?
Yep, Leslie Ann, have you access to the presentation? Yep, there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I outlined, we're going to talk about our maintenance and repair service to tenants. So I'll start off in the first few slides, and then Kevin Butler, our Director of Property Services, will come in and speak specifically about our repairs and maintenance service. So next slide, please. So I'm going to start by giving you an overview of our current stock and future plans in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area. And then Kevin will go on to talk to you about our maintenance and repair service. So next slide, please. So Apex is one of the larger housing associations in Northern Ireland, and at the minute we have a stock of 6,433 properties, which are geographically spread throughout Northern Ireland. But the biggest proportion of our stock is here in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area. So at the minute we have 3,303 properties in the area. The bulk of that stock is general family accommodation. So you'll see there we have just over 2,600 general needs properties, but we are also a key provider of supported living. So we provide care and support across a number of facilities throughout the district council area and beyond. And those provide a range of services, including hostels for those with alcohol and drug addiction. We have accommodation for those with learning disabilities, mental health issues. We have a foyer for young people, and a range of accommodation to meet older people's needs, which includes sheltered housing. I've also included an update that shows you the age of our stock, and I know that will be relevant in regard to maintenance and repairs and the service that we carry out in that way. So you'll see there that just over 1,000 of our properties are less than 10 years old, and a further 662 are less than 20 years old. And just over 2,600 properties are less than 30 years old. So the bulk of our stock is fairly young at this point in time. Moving on to the next slide, please. So in regard to the provision of social housing, Apex is a key player in regard to the provision of this at the minute. And as I mentioned, we do have over 6,500 properties spread across Northern Ireland, and we do provide about 25% of the new social housing per year across Northern Ireland. And in regard to our plans for the Derry City and Strabane District Council area in the coming period, we hope to get on site in St Brecken's Park. The slide is saying September, and that's slipped a wee bit at this stage, so it's likely to be November 2021, and that will finish that development. There's 14 units to be built there. And then we have plans for the H2 lands, and that will come forward in 2 phases. I'm hoping to be on site in March 2022 with the first phase, which will provide 450 new units of accommodation, and H2 lands phase 2, which we hope to go on site in March 2023, and that will provide a further 400 units of accommodation. So a total plan at this stage for 864 units. So that provides an overview basically of our current stock and our plans for the near future in regard to the council area. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kevin Butler now, who's going to give you an update in regard to our repairs and maintenance service.
Kevin, are you online there? I don't think he's online.
He's not. I'll cover it then. So in regards to our repairs and maintenance service at the minute, we provide a 24-hour service 365 days of the year. And in regard to the calls that we receive, we categorise them across 4 categories. So anything that requires an immediate response, we will endeavour to respond to within 4 hours. Anything that's an emergency within 24 hours, and then anything that's classified as urgent within 4 days. And then our routine repairs then would be carried out within 20 working days. So next slide, please. So in regard to the examples of the types of repairs that would be completed within those timescales, so the first of those in terms of immediate repairs, so breakdown of home heating, a water leak that cannot be contained, or major structural damage, we would endeavour to be out there within 4 hours in regard to responding to that. In terms of emergency repairs, so breakdown of heating system, no lights or power, a blocked toilet where only one exists on the property, or an issue with a smoke, heat or carbon monoxide detector not working, we would endeavour to respond to that within 24 hours. Next slide, please. So in regard to urgent repairs then, so 4 working days would be our time scale in regard to responding to issues around a leak at a toilet or a radiator, a partial breakdown of the heating system, such as one radiator not working, sparks coming from a socket or switches or fuses continually blowing, or repairs to external door locks. And then in regard to our routine repairs that would be classified for repair within 20 working days, that would be issues around internal and external doors requiring adjustment, or minor window repairs, repairs to broken gates and fences, and repairs to kitchen units and leaking taps. Next slide, please. So in relation to our repairs performance in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area, we have put up 2 sets of slides, 2 sets of statistics, sorry, here, and this is really to compare 1920 with 2021, and 2021 being an unusual year, really as a result of the pandemic and the restrictions that were imposed. So in regard to our repairs and routine maintenance service, you'll see there that for immediate repairs, the overall average in 2020 was 97.9%, slightly higher actually in 2021 at 98.61%. Emergency repairs 98.61% versus 93.77% in 2021. Urgent 92.22%, and you'll see a significant fall there during 2021 in terms of 76.79%, and routine again 89.21% in 1920, dropping back to 73.53% in 2021, and that really was as a result of the impact of the restrictions. So in the early stages of the restrictions, we were responding in the main to immediate and emergency repairs. As a result of that, a backlog did arise, but I'm glad to say that that backlog at this stage has been cleared. So I'm trusting that the members here today won't have had any issue in regard to repairs that have been outstanding for a significant period of time. Next slide, please. So in regard to investment in terms of maintenance and repairs within our properties, from the period 2019 to 2021, Apex invested £18 million in repairs and maintenance during that period. £6 million was spent on responsive repairs and grounds maintenance, and our grounds maintenance work is managed on a 2-week rotating cycle. £4 million was spent on cyclical maintenance, which included 1,000 homes that were redecorated, so that's external painting, and 500 dwellings had smoke and CO2 alarms replaced. There was also £6 million spent on plant maintenance, which included 275 oil to gas heating conversions at Cornshell Fields and 250 kitchen replacements. And we also spent during the period £2 million on statutory compliance obligations, which include Legionella checks, PAT testing, and electrical inspections. Next slide, please. So what we do in regard to planning our repairs and maintenance service, we do have an asset management strategy in place, and that really looks at the age of property, but also the age of components that sit within a property. So there'll be a time frame set out within that for replacement of kitchens, heating systems, bathrooms, windows, the various components that exist within a property. And we will endeavour in terms of planning our planned maintenance programmes to meet those targets in terms of replacing those items. We do have a consultant-led property condition survey that is undertaken on a rolling basis in terms of ensuring that the condition of our properties is up to standard and identifying the life cycles in regard to the various components that exist within properties. We provide advice and support to tenants. We do have our routine responsive repairs and maintenance service for ongoing issues that arise within homes on a day-to-day basis. We have statutory compliance in place, which is the regular testing of various aspects of the services that we provide. And then we have our planned improvement works, which really falls out of that asset management strategy that I mentioned at the beginning. We do have a rolling programme as well of external and internal redecoration, and the internal redecoration relates specifically to our supported living schemes where we have tenants and residents that live there 24/7, and we provide not just accommodation but also care and support. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have a grounds maintenance programme as well, and we have an in-house team, and we also use external contractors to assist us in that regard. Moving on to the next slide, please. So how we endeavour to achieve our standards, it is our aim in regard to bringing through our values in regard to our tenants, that we do respond promptly to tenants' repairs and queries in an appropriate way, that we listen to our tenants and residents in regard to the issues that are raised, and we seek to respond to them on an individual basis. We do monitor KPI contractor performance as well, and we do undertake quality assurance checks on completed repairs. We do regularly monitor resident and tenant satisfaction, and we do have a number of ways that we seek to collect that information. And we do regularly monitor and report on repair completion targets, expenditure and statutory compliance and performance, and that's reported internally, and it's also reported externally as well through our annual report and various means. Next slide, please. So we do know that from time to time concerns do arise in regards to the services that we provide, which includes our repairs and maintenance service, and what we would endeavour to do is try and resolve the issue at the first point of contact, and that really is our aim and objective. However, we know that that doesn't always happen, and that is unfortunate and not where we want to be. So in that regard, we do have a complaints policy in place. And in relation to that, tenants are advised that they can make a formal complaint to us, and it will be fully investigated. So we do work as well with an active tenant network. So we do have tenant representatives across a significant number of our states, and we engage with them on a very regular basis as well. And that's not about just responding to issues and concerns. It's also about saying, how can we improve the delivery of our service as we go forward? So getting tenant feedback to drive improvement through the organisation. So that's all. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Sheena. Even though you were through in at the deep end there at the last minute, we have a few indicated speakers at the moment, and I've no doubt that more will jump on. So the first is Councillor Patricia Logue.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sheena, for that presentation. They're certainly very detailed. I suppose the first question I would have, given the pandemic and all that has come with that, is your plant maintenance programme scheme now on track? And as I said in my previous comments to the housing executive presenters, I think it would be most useful for councillors of their DEAs to have notification of the plant maintenance schemes that are planned, and also the names of the project managers and contractors. It would certainly save a lot of phone calling and phoning the different people. You know, I think that would be most useful. Another question I have, and I suppose this is very relevant to the report that the housing executive survey that they carried out on the cavity wall insulation. That report was very, very damning indeed, and I am aware that you know, you did say at the start of your presentation that most of your stock is relatively new, but there are some stock that would have been built in the 80s and the 90s, and I'm thinking specifically here about Glen, you know, and has Apex looked at the cavity wall report that was presented by the Housing Executive in 2019. If you haven't, I do think that every housing association and private owners certainly need to be looking at that report and doing whatever it takes to sort out the very real issues, which I'm sure a lot of Apex tenants have too as well. I suppose I did mention Glen, and it's been one of your older estates, and I know there are flat roofs in part of some of the houses there. So I do think they have been causing problems for a number of tenants. So is there
Councillor
any
Lowe,
plans?
can I ask you to bring your remarks to a close, please?
Yes, is there any plans, you know, in your plant maintenance to address that? And I suppose just finally, Apex do run a lot of sheltered accommodation, and you know, we know there's a lot of more elderly people who are availing of that type of accommodation, but they also need mobility scooters. So, and a lot of your properties would not have the facilities for those scooters. So is there any plans to update especially your housing, your sheltered housing accommodation to
Councillor Lowe, please.
finish now, Mayor? Any plans for your sheltered housing association to accommodate those who need mobility scooters? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Sheena, we'll come back to you. I'm going to just take them in batches if that's okay. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sheena, for the presentation. I know Patricia has spoken on behalf of our party, but I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to specifically welcome the development that's in Breckens Park. I know, and then congratulate everybody that's been involved in that. So the development that's in Breckens Park, the first phase, and Sheena will be only too familiar with it, has provided much needed homes for a large number of young families, and we all look forward to the next phase. And I know in particular Apex housing officers have went over and above they facilitate and support the new tenants and the integration into the local community, and that's not surprising, Mayor, because we've had the same experience with Apex, the Apex housing officers and patch managers in respect to Condemna Park. So we've locally we've become accustomed to the high quality work that's been carried out by Apex officers. But just in respect to St. Breckens Park, I know there's quite a large number of families that have moved in the area, a lot of young children, and whilst the development is fantastic, it's state of the art, it's award winning, there is concerns around, or there's a request from some residents for additional road safety measures, and I would appreciate if appropriate, if either Sheena or Kevin or somebody from Apex could get in touch with me outside of this meeting, to explore different or additional road safety measures that may be put in place to improve the development in St. Breckens Park. But other than that, I would like to welcome the Sheena to the meeting, and I look forward to seeing more development in the waterside from Apex. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Sheena, if you want to go ahead and address those for me now, please.
Okay, so first of all, Councillor Logan, in regard to your queries and concerns, we do have a plant maintenance programme, and that was impacted by COVID. In regard to that, I understand from Kevin that we will be fully back on track in mid-June in regard to all of our plant maintenance programmes being back on site again, and I can follow up if there's any specific queries following the meeting in relation to that. In relation to the cavity wall insulation report, we have looked at the report, and we are conscious of the age of Glenone. Glenone is our oldest development and does present challenges in regard to the fact that there are many owner-occupiers, but that does not negate in regard to our obligations to the tenants there in relation to that. So we will look at that specifically in regard to the two issues that you have raised in regard to the flat roofs and the cavity wall insulation, and we'll come back in regard to both of those issues. In relation to sheltered accommodation and the provision of mobility scooters, in more recent years, that has provided a challenge, and there are challenges in regard to that in relation to space and health and safety. And I know across a number of schemes we have sought to provide areas where tenants can locate their scooter and also have it charged. But again, if there's any specific issues around any particular schemes in relation to that, again, I'm happy to pick up in regard to individual schemes, because we have quite a number of sheltered housing schemes in and around the town. So if there's any specific issues, I will pick up in regard to that. Councillor Jackson, in relation to St Brecken's Park, thank you for your positive comments in regard to this scheme and the services provided by our staff, and hopefully that's the way that we endeavour to deliver services within all our developments, that we keep that personal touch and our staff are out on the ground and seeing what's happening and engaging with all of our tenants. And I know COVID has provided challenges, but hopefully we've been able to keep that close contact. In regard to the issues raised in regard to the road safety issues, again, I'm happy to pick up following the meeting in relation to that, and either Kevin or myself will get in touch in relation to that. I need to check just in terms of the adoption of the roads and the installation of ramps, but we can pick up on that.
Thank you very much, Sheena. There's no further indicated speakers on this one. So I'm just going to thank you all for your attendance and your attention to detail in relation to your presentation and the questions that have been asked by members. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leslie Ann, can we remove the Apex deputation and bring in the Radius Housing deputation, please? Thank you, Leslie Ann. Members will kick off once again with our deputation from Radius Housing. You're very welcome. On behalf of Council, thank you very much for agreeing to attend this meeting to present to local councillors. I'll hand over to yourselves and you can take us through your presentation, please.
Mayor, thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. I'm very pleased to introduce from Radius. We have Aisling McStravick, who is our Director of Assets, and we have Loma Wilson, who's our Director of Communities. And we're obviously very pleased today to come in and to speak regarding the our existing homes in the Derry and Strabane area. Mayor, before I begin, I just wanted to thank in particular the councillors who have been very helpful in this recent year in terms of helping us commence our Sean Dolan project on site. Really delighted to get that project underway. A major project, both in terms of its mixed use and obviously the number of different players that helped come together and to make that project possible for what will bring 120 new homes to the area, which is tremendous. And also indeed the work on the Abrington Barrack site, where we've been very pleased to advance that, and we're really pleased with the progress on site. Radius has in total just under 1,000 homes right across the area, and I know Aisling will talk in some detail about our plans and how indeed we work hard with our tenants on the ground and the board to make sure that we're providing the best possible overall service. And that includes obviously the important maintenance service, but also the housing support side. And Loma in particular might share some of the ideas and some of the things we're doing on the ground to help in what we call community investment. And that's where we're supporting our tenants to sustain their tenancies in the face of some really difficult, challenging times, not least COVID, Brexit, and some of the aspects of welfare reforms, which have obviously hit hard in many communities. So, Mayor, without any further ado, I'm going to maybe invite Aisling to upload the presentation, and we'll take it from there. That's okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, just to check, I think that the presentation is there and available to share.
Yeah, Aisling, that'll just come on screen there now.
Okay, thank you. So if we could just go to slide 3. Okay, so this is really just an overview to confirm to the councillors the approach that we take and that we're required to take under our regulatory body to provide a repair service. And want to outline exactly the kind of strategy and strategic objectives that we'll be trying to deliver within our repair service. I do think you'll see quite a lot of repetition as you go through each of the associations, because we all work to DFC guidelines and we all pretty much follow the same approach in terms of the services that we do offer and the time scales that we work to and the types of KPIs and so on that we perform to. But with regards to Radius, we are trying to ensure that we're investing in a strategic way, that we're keeping our stock to a lettable condition, that all of our repair services meets legislative requirements, and is also making sure we have effective communication with our customers and our tenants. We go on to next slide. So the breadth of our provision within the maintenance department in Radius, we provide service in relation to the day-to-day response repairs, which I think everybody would be very au fait with, but we're also involved with the planned refurbishments and the component renewals, statutory compliance, part of the business, annual servicing, we look after the procurement of contracts, and then we also deliver a service for disabled adaptations through OT recommendations for customers who live within our properties. The next slide. Our responsive maintenance service is, as with all of the others, a 365 24/7 day-to-day service, and we deal with priority jobs which are categorised as either emergent, urgent or routine. Some information provided there just on what that category actually refers to. The next slide. Our targets are set by DFC, as I said, and the performance that we're required to achieve is 85% of all of our emergency jobs delivered within the 24 hours from the issue of the instruction. We're required to either make safe or repair where possible under an emergency instruction. And urgent is 4 working days, and a routine is 4 calendars work, which some will refer to as a 20 working day routine order. Next slide. This is a bit of an overview in terms of the repairs that have been delivered within the Derry City and Strabane District Council area. As John said, we have just under 1,000, just over 980 properties in the area. The majority of those are general family housing, and we also have quite a lot of sheltered housing within the area as well. In the last financial year, we delivered over 4,000 response repair jobs, and we've just given you an indication there of the kind of split between the requests that come through. The majority of those are actually urgent jobs, but there's quite a significant amount of investment in relation to emergency jobs as well. So next slide. Our performance just against the DFC, showing there in blue to show that we are performing and meeting and exceeding our targets. Okay, next slide. And this is key documentation in relation to communication. So every one of our customers, whenever they sign up to Radius Properties, provided with the Radius Tenant Handbook, and that identifies all of those aspects of repair that are the responsibility of us as a landlord, and all of those other items that would be the tenant's responsibility. So I think this slide and then the next slide just gives you an indication of the type of repairs that we deliver, and those ones which would be a tenant responsibility. Next slide. So in addition to our day-to-day response repairs, we also deliver a planned investment programme. These are 6 of the categories that we would be focused upon at this point in time. We tend to deliver multi-element improvement schemes where we have sheltered housing or blocks of accommodation so that we can deliver lots of different component renewals and complacements at one time. And then we also run threads and programs of very specific types of planned investment around heating replacements, sometimes where we have significant hardware in terms of lifts, fire alarm systems, emergency lighting systems, and those types of things under health and safety. And we also roll out cyclical redecoration works, which can be internal and also external. This last year, we've had a particular focus around sustainability and are ensuring that all of our projects and our planned programs now consider the EPC ratings and performance of our stock. And so that takes into account issues that have been referenced earlier today, such as cavity wall insulation, the installation of LED lighting, anything that can improve efficiency. And we're also still rolling out quite a significant programme of heating replacements within the Derry City Council area. At the moment, there's quite a significant investment over this year where we're having oil boilers that have reached the end of their useful life and are being replaced with gas boilers. The next slide. Our compliance work streams are very significant, and I know colleagues previously from the sector will have talked about the different lines of activity. So we have a responsibility to ensure all of our gas installations are serviced within a 12-month. We regularly service and check our water hygiene within all of our properties. Fire safety equipment and also fire systems are checked monthly, serviced and replaced as required. We undertake fire risk assessments every year for all of our blocks, and we deliver a programme of asbestos management inspections and then follow up. In addition to that, we do a best practice of fixed wire testing on a 5-year cycle. Next slide. Our disabled adaptations are, as I said earlier, grant funded through the Housing Executives DPG fund, and we receive referrals from occupational therapists, and we undertake a number of types of adaptations. Those can be minor, and minor adaptations can be as little as a grab rail or as significant as a through the floor lift or a new ramp installation. We do bath to shower adaptations across quite a lot of our stock. And then we also have major adaptation works, which is for the construction of an extension to a property to facilitate, say, an extra bedroom or a wet room or disabled access bathroom. Next slide. And that concludes just a general overview of the service that we provide within Radius. If there are any questions, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Aisling, for that. I have no indicated speakers at the moment.
Could I just add one comment?
Yeah,
obviously it pains to point out our manager for the area, Bridie Doherty, is somebody who will be familiar to many of the councillors, and I believe she provides a particularly proactive service on the ground, supporting not only the general needs in the family, but obviously the many generations of people who've lived in our sheltered schemes. And I know many of your members will have dealt with Bridie on a day-to-day basis. I was wondering if Loma just might want to contribute on the issue of the the various support mechanisms we do have in place to help tenants sustain their tenancies. Yeah.
No problem, John. Yes. Good evening, everyone. I'll just touch briefly on it. I would say that, as John has referred to, our tenants are living in challenging times at the moment, and we're very conscious of that. And I know that Bridie plays a critical role in the Northwest Forum that you have going there, which is excellent. But as an association, what we're always trying to do is see, can we maximise our tenants' income and help them sustain their tenancies? So we have a community investment team who are focused on that, who have welfare advice officers. So those welfare advice officers offer specialist advice in helping people make sure that they have all the benefits in place and deal with any hardship queries that come through. So in response to that, and I suppose in what we were seeing coming through in the challenging times we have at the moment, we have set up a tenant hardship fund as well. So if somebody's in crisis and they need a short-term stopgap payment, they can make an application through to us, and Radius has that facility now in place, which is great. So a lot of good work going on. I'll not go into all the detail of it, but as John says, Brady's the first point of contact there for tenants, and hopefully we have that great support in place.
And we do, I would add to the fact that we work very well with the local community groups, and I'm in particular conscious of the Foyle Food Bank that we've managed to set up and run, and some of the, in previous years, the Christmas special funds for the children in terms of the distribution of presents and things at that difficult time. So we're, again, please do pass on our thanks to your colleagues.
Thank you all very much for your contributions there. I'm going to move to speakers now. Emmett Doyle, Councillor Emmett Doyle.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to everybody from Radius for coming on. I don't want to be a negative Nelly about this, but it has sort of been brought up to me a couple of times, and I want to raise specifically a case that is now sorted out, but at the point that it had got to me was quite serious, and it was from a Radius tenant in my DEA. Where a young mother who had a young child and was pregnant had been left in her home without any heating for 4 weeks, and that she had been, in terms of support from Radius, she had been sent down a number of times, a number of blow heaters to compensate until such times as I generally don't know to this day what the issue overall was, and there's been a number of single mothers in particular who have mentioned to me that they feel themselves that they don't necessarily get a full hearing when it comes to Radius. Now, I don't have anything to back that up other than their word, but given the circumstance of that case that I mentioned, which is now resolved, and given that heating, for example, is one of the things that we should be looking at on a very serious basis, 4 weeks is obviously unacceptable, and I think you would probably agree with me on that. Is there any kind of response to that? I suppose, as I say, it's been brought to me by a number of different people in those circumstances, and whilst I don't have any empirical evidence to back it up, if there's a feeling out there, I suppose that may just be a customer service aspect of things, but certainly it's been raised with me, and I'd be interested in your views. Thank you.
Obviously, it's difficult to talk specifically about a case. It wouldn't be the right forum to do that, and I would be happy offline, obviously, to discuss it, as would Loma and Brady. But in the general sense, I can absolutely give you assurance that we're we, as was explained there, we are very focused on the issue of hardship. Now, again, not specifically commenting on one case, but in some cases we've had very unfortunate situations where we have to do a gas service inspection, and maybe that has been blocked for a period for no logical reason. We've made maybe 6, 7 attempts to gain an entrance, and we've had to cap the gas in the interest of not only the health and safety of the individual, but obviously in the health and safety of everybody else who lives maybe in that apartment block. That's as much as safety legislation thing. So I don't know whether it's specifically on that, but I can assure you that when we're aware of a heating failure, it's flagged up to the senior team, and we do take emergency action. There have been, in my time, there have been emergency cases, for example, where sheltered schemes have lost heating, and we've had to, in some cases, locate a control panel that maybe came from France or further afield there. Such is the nature of the maintenance situation you can find yourself in. But I can definitely assure you that we have not, we have certainly no hard attitude towards single mothers. Very much the opposite. We really want to help them, as is explained. We want to help them sustain their tenancies, and indeed, in the case that they're facing no heating for them and their kids, that's a serious issue for us that we would take very seriously. But I would be happy to talk offline with you on that one if that helped.
Yes, absolutely, John. I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Very much.
No problem at all. Okay. Appreciate you raising it as well.
Thank you, John, for that. Members, there's no further indicated speakers on the Radius presentation. So I'm going to thank all of you for your attendance, and particularly for for hanging around in the lobby for so long.
Not at all.
It's very much appreciated by all of the elected members here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Leslie Ann, can you remove the radius deputation and bring in the Habentag housing deputation? Members, just while Leslie Ann's doing that, I have another mayoral engagement to attend. So I'm going to ask the Deputy Mayor if he would take over at agenda item number 4, please. I think it's deputation number 4. Graham?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and
Thank you.
good evening, members. I think it's item number 9. Just wait until it comes on. Is Philip online? Is he Philip Mooney?
Graham, you're okay to go ahead there now, Graham. Leslie Ann, if you can just direct the messages there now to Graham. I'm going to sign out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah.
That may go.
Okay, Philip, over to you.
On behalf of Habentag Housing Association, I'd like to thank the council for inviting me along to the meeting today. I'm Philip Minnie. I'm the assets manager based in the Derry office. For anybody who doesn't know Habentag Housing Association, we were founded in 1976 as a registered housing association. We currently have over 2,500 properties across the north. We have a wide range of dwellings, from family houses to apartment blocks and bungalows. We also work with a number of different partner organisations in providing supported housing projects. Our head office is currently in Hollywood in County Down, and we also have an office above the Exchange Restaurant in Derry. We've been asked along here today to brief members on Habentag's maintenance and repair responsibilities to our tenants. If you just want to share the wee presentation there. So I suppose the easiest way to explain repair responsibilities is to break them down into the repair priorities. So first of all, we have the emergency repairs. Anything that impedes on the safety of the occupants within the property, the safety of the property, or the occupants' ability to remain in their homes. Examples of that include major electrical faults, blocked sewers, burst pipes, and no access to hot water. Other emergencies would be heating breakdowns if it was like an elderly tenant, or if they had young children in the property, or if it was in the winter time. It's probably worth noting as well there that if the heating contractor can't repair the heating system, it would be temporary with the tenants. And we also offer an out of hours emergency service via Radius Connect 24. And then moving on to urgent repairs there. Anything urgent, sorry, a wee bit too fast there. Anything that affects the functionality of a home. Obviously if the toilet's not working, minor leaks, faulty lights, or broken switches, or anything like that's classified as an urgent repair. We would have an aim of completing that within 4 working days. Move on to the next slide there, please. And then routine repairs, works that are considered minor and doesn't impact the functionality of a home, or large scale works or multiple trades. Examples of joinery include replacing skirting boards and architrave, repairs to kitchen, minor plumbing works, replacement taps or replacement toilets or sinks. Next slide there, please. Obviously, we recognise the importance of repairs to our tenants, and we endeavour to get repairs completed as quickly as we possibly can. Whenever we report a repair through to our contractor, all tenants will receive a text message In this, there'll be details of the contractor, the urgency, when it's due to be completed, and details of what exactly was reported. I suppose moving on to repair responsibility there. Externally, Habentag's responsible for structural repairs, external doors, windows, chimneys, gutters, downpipes, drains, external painting to woodwork, ironmongery, and any other surfaces that were previously painted. We also cover communal landscaping, grass maintenance, hedge maintenance, leaf and litter clearance, shrub bed maintenance, hard surfaces, and weed control. We undertake annual tree surveys and carry out tree surgery works based on these recommendations. We also carry out ECM works. We aim to do repaints to schemes every 5 to 7 years. Next slide there, please. Internally, obviously Habentag are responsible for structural repairs to walls, floors and ceilings, stairs and handrails. We're also responsible for plumbing repairs to sinks, cisterns and baths. Habentag are responsible for heating systems. This includes your radiators, your hot water cylinders, boilers, water storage tanks, all the pipes and fittings, and electrical repairs. We also cover statutory compliance. So every property with a gas boiler and an oil boiler will be serviced every 12 months. During this service, we also check the smoke alarms and the CO alarms. We check the electrics to all properties every 5 years. In apartment blocks, we check the fire alarms every week, and we also check the emergency lighting every month. We carry out annual fire risk assessments to all our apartment blocks, common rooms and office. Our planned works program, obviously that's based on our stock condition survey. We also get input from our contractors and the staff on the ground. That would include like window and door replacements, kitchen replacements, heating upgrades, bathroom upgrades, cavity wall and loft insulation upgrades. Just moving on there to what tenants are responsible for. Just to brief members of the committee here, what tenants are responsible for. Obviously the upkeep of their gardens, hedges, trees, clearing of gullies, drains. They're also responsible for replacement of clotheslines within their tenancy. Next slide there, please. Internally, tenants are responsible for painting and decorating, small plaster repairs. Moving on to the next slide there, please. And again, electrical, tenants are responsible for replacing light bulbs and checking their fuse box if there's a fault with electrics, obviously to check the circuit breakers and that before we report it through. And they're also responsible for fitting TV aerials and satellite dishes and replacement of wheelie bins. The next slide there, please. Within our maintenance department, we also have an adaptations team. They deal directly with referrals from OTs. And just like there are associations there, they could be minor adaptations like grab rails, and moving on to like level access chairs, and then major adaptations like bedroom extensions. And then moving on to the last slide then. Within the Derry and Strabane District Council area, we have over 900 properties. They're spread across 23 housing schemes in and around Derry. And we also have 4 housing schemes in Strabane and another scheme in Siam Mills. And just touching on our development programme then, we currently have works on site at Central Drive in Craigan, Duke Street in Derry, Abercorn Road in Derry, Letterkenny Road in Derry, and we're due to start the Adria site in Strabane. So obviously that will bring the total number of properties up over the incoming years. So that's me. If anybody has any questions, thank you.
Thank you for that, Philip. I don't see any members on the queue to speak here, so I don't. But I'd like to thank you today anyway. Oh, sorry, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for that, Philip. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, Gary.
Philip, I'd like to talk about Eden Square. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but basically there's been a lot of issues going on there over the last year. And you're talking issues like stabbings, slashings, furniture being thrown out of windows, threats being made to tenants, and it's deteriorated again over the last two months. And I found that when you talk about responsibilities and responsibilities of tenants, I would just like to say that I feel that Habentag have reneged on any responsibilities to the tenants of Eden Square, because I've been dealing with this for a long time and I just keep getting brushed off. And I know that a number of tenants in there, at least 3 families, have all applied to leave, and that I know 2 families at the minute that their children won't even go back to the properties after what they've seen. And I have to put in record that Habentag's response is very, very unsatisfactory. And right up until even a few days ago, I was told that 2 of the families that I was dealing with, that they would be contacted on Monday, and I've just spoke to one of them there now, and they haven't been contacted. So I just want to put that on record, that there is children who won't go to their home, and your officers are aware of that. Thank you.
Just to respond to that there, Gary, obviously I'm the maintenance manager. I'll take on your concerns there and I'll report them back to our housing team. Hopefully we'll get your response tomorrow on that.
Thank you for that, Philip. Councillor Jackson looking on there.
Thanks. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thanks, Philip, for the report. And see, I suppose in a similar vein to Councillor Donnelly, I have had unsatisfactory experiences with tenants or unsatisfactory experiences with some of your tenants in respect to Habentag. And I know in one instance it was in relation to an entire scheme that was carried out in Galvin Gardens, and it was almost every single house that had work done to it experienced problems, and some quite serious problems. I know you would be familiar with them, and I know at the time Habentag had stepped in to try and remedy, but I know from speaking to a lot of the residents is that they still they're still experiencing some of the issues, particularly with the heating. So it would only be right for us to raise it at this point, is that sometimes when we see schemes coming forward, residents in particular, some of these schemes are long awaited, but it's really frustrating whenever we experience widespread problems like we did in Galvin Gardens. Just in respect to the presentation that you provided, I know it might seem small, but given and I don't want to sound panicky, but see, given the levels of development that you alluded to within the city and district, we do expect to see much more housing provided by Habentag. It does seem strange that there isn't uniformity in terms of the responsibilities. Seems very strange that it's a tenant's responsibility to provide a bun, where in other housing associations it's the housing association or the housing executive would take on that responsibility. The same for windows if they're damaged, and it does seem strange that there's much more of an emphasis placed on the tenant rather than the housing association. And finally, and this is something that it's not unique to Habentag, and it's probably more prevalent with other housing associations that have their headquarters outside or east of the ban. I've found that the response maintenance can be protracted at times, and I know in some instances when you've got contractors coming from Belfast or come to traveling into Derry to carry out small repairs, there can be a sense of resentment, thinking that they travelled long distances. So, in terms of your response maintenance, is there any local contractors that are being used by Habentag? Because I know it had been a complaint in the past, albeit that it's come back a year or two now, where we did have some negative experiences from contractors coming from outside of the city. And I know I'm aware of other schemes or pilot schemes by other housing associations.
Hi, Sir Jackson.
Yep, I'm coming to an end now. But I just know that there was pilot schemes that used local contractors to improve the response times. So I just wondered, is that something that Habentag are looking into? Thank you.
Obviously, thank you, Councillor Jackson, for your comments there. I'd like to just get back to you on some of the things there, maybe at a later time. Obviously, I am aware of the issues at Galvin Gardens regarding the heating upgrades, and that's something that we did look into. And as far as I know, all the issues have been resolved. Regarding our plant maintenance contractor, the company's not based in the city, but that doesn't mean that the work that they carry out doesn't still meet the deadlines and the timescales that we set in place for them. And I suppose just bringing it on there regarding some of the things that were in my presentation, I maybe didn't make that clear. We do provide a wheelie bin at the start of a tenancy, but it's just if a tenant loses their bin during a tenancy, they're responsible for replacing it.
Well, thank you for that, Philip. I do not see any other further members, and Philip, I'd like to thank you for coming on this evening. The talk, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move on to agenda 10, and that's to bring in Mr. T. Griffin. He is not he hasn't got a presentation on. I don't know if he's online there yet. So Philip, if we drop you down, but thank you very much for coming on and answering questions.
No bother, thank you.
Tony, you online there?
I am, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Carry on, Tony.
I think maybe at the I haven't got a presentation. I was just going to talk to members really about the context of Clonmill and our services in the area. But I think colleagues have gave a broad overview in the context of, I think Aisling mentioned, we all operate under the Housing Association guides and the requirements for the Department of Communities. Just as a bit of context for Clonmill, we're just shy, a few hundred units shy of 6,000 units. But but we have 188 in the Derry and Strabane area. The majority of those are apartments. We have 143, and the remainder are a mix of bungalows and houses. Services wise, I'm the director of assets, and the assets function is broadly similar to colleagues. Forgive me if I'm repeating, but there has been obviously some repetition, particularly the housing associations, in contrast to the housing executives at today's meeting. Response performance, although the department sets targets of completion within 85 to 80%, we have a target of 92. We have not met that this year, and I think all contractors have struggled, and I think housing associations have struggled. And I think post-lockdown and post-COVID, I think there is some signs of labour costs, materials costs, and so on, and even materials availability. Some components come from mainland Europe, and I think arrangements and so on, supply chains have all been upset, from everything from supplies coming from Suez and so on, and it's had an impact, and that's what we're hearing from contractors. I think generally tenants have been very patient, and it was palpable, actually, the civic responsibility that probably we all had was evident in tenants' patience. We still have a bit of a backlog. We're working with our contractors to clear those. But we're also in a point of transition, both for the organisation as a whole, and also particularly on our maintenance contracts. We've recently started a procurement exercise, and our current contract ends at the end of August. The broad service within assets is very, very similar to what colleagues have highlighted. Response maintenance, as I've mentioned, and all the responsibilities between tenant and landlord are broadly the same. Our response times are the same. We also offer planned maintenance. We carry out our planned maintenance planning through a rolling stock survey by in-house staff. We supplement it slightly with external consultants, and we feed that into our long-term plan. So again, very similar components replaced on a life cycle, but we have an arrangement where when we identify on a broad level, we take it down to scheme level and speak to staff and see if there's any particular problems in that area. So we may be upgrading the lighting, but there could be a security problem, so we'll enhance that with maybe cameras and lighting and so on that's pertinent to that related work. We have structured our assets team and our housing management team in accordance with each of the council areas. Our area maintenance officer for the council area he's one of the longest standing members of the team. He's based in Derry himself. And we found that's worked well, and particularly this council area, there's a very, very good connection. But unfortunately, with other staff and other areas changing, this is one of probably the longest members of the team who's worked in the area, and we can see the benefits of that. And it's something that Clanmill is very proactive about, is about taking our structure and our services to local areas and connecting with those. We've recently started a process of tenant engagement, and we have local engagement fora, and we've asked our residents to come forward and to open a dialogue with us, point out where our services are falling short, to help us devise new services, right through from readers panels. We've some tenants that sit on my fire safety group, which is a very specific area, and we're continually looking at all aspects of fire safety. We also have a grounds maintenance contract, which is across Northern Ireland, and I know the comment was made earlier about local suppliers, and it's about scale. It's about scale, and it's about procurement, and it's obtaining value for money. We have, though, however, in the most recent contract, based the contract primarily around service. and quality as opposed to solely price driven. One of the things that we have developed within the new contract, and it's something that's coming down the line, is, and it touches on some of the points that members have raised, is our new website, and having within that a tenant portal that a tenant can track repairs and possibly book appointments. So we maybe can't give appointments for every wee bit like your Tesco. There's a limited number of slots, and if people who are working or have other family constraints, we can earmark that, and that'll be interfaced with the new contractor's system. So we're hoping that'll improve service, because we've had contractors who have arrived in the area who are maybe doing one job, see another job on their list, and make a call. That doesn't suit tenants all the time. We also have a great emphasis within Clonmel on compliance. I think colleagues have mentioned some of the main compliance areas, but we have a broad range. We do compliance testing on about 33 areas, right from the big ones of gas through to, you know, lightning conductors and so on, that all require safety checks. So we have quite a rigorous system for that. Future development, we develop about 300 units a year, and we're always keen to engage with elected representatives and communities to try to increase that. Our director of development, we have a very proactive development program, and we're amenable to meet with council on that specific area if that's something that members in a specific area would like to explore. Future developments, as I mentioned, the website and the tenant portal, and we feel we need to develop more interactive services. It brings efficiency for us as an association and our costs, which means it frees up more to put into our properties and services for tenants, but also it's just what customers want. And you know, and that's something that we're making a significant investment for, and we hope to have the new website up and running the latter half of this year. Our new corporate strategy is just about to be launched. Without stealing our chief executive and chair's thunder, partnerships and relationships is a big theme within that, as is community development. And it's something that Clonmel has always prided itself on. We have a number of T-Buck schemes, none in this council area, but it's something that we're open to in line with our development. But we have a number of colleagues in a community team who are about just making or helping communities and our part in that, and we don't take the approach that we will shape a community. We're coming in as part of that community, and we want to work with the community that helps us and helps tenants and our tenants and beyond. We also offer a money advice service. I think John mentioned that, and that is very, very similar around about trying to help with benefits for people in hardship, and that's a confidential service, and the area housing officer can make referrals for any tenant that feels they might need that. And finally, then, the other principal theme within our new corporate strategy is decarbonisation and our environmental strategy. And that is, there's a number of strands to it. One is about driving our costs down as a business, and also those costs that we pass through to tenants in communal apartments and so on, that they have to meet through their service charge. It's also about future-proofing and decarbonisation of our properties, and we've assessed all our properties and their energy performance. We're quite high. Similar to what Sheena had said, our stock's relatively new, maybe compared to the housing executive, and we would have a higher energy performance rating, but we're well short of where we need to be by 2040, and certainly towards zero carbon. So we're starting that now, and we have some of the poorest performing we've identified works to in the next 2 years planned maintenance program. But within the strategy as well, we've also issues dovetailing with our community work about taking environmental issues right to scheme level, and what can we do as a property and a landowner to promote habitat and biodiversity. So that's things we want to promote as well. And then working in partnership with tenants, how they want us to perform as a business. And we're hearing that increasingly from tenants that, you know, or what are we doing as regards environmental issues? So that's another theme for the future. So I'm happy to take any questions, Deputy Chair.
Thank you for that. I do not see any members with any questions. I don't know if you're happy about that or not, Tony, but you know,
well, it's positive in one way.
It is.
I do appreciate there's been maybe an element of repetition.
Yeah. Tony, I'd like to thank you anyway coming on this evening and talking to members, and you're the final speaker. And I'd like to thank all the speakers coming on. It was very, very useful tonight. So, Tony, I'd like to thank you anyway.
Okay.
Members, I know a lot of us have a meeting in a couple of minutes again. There's a rural development meeting starting here. So just moving on to agenda 11, that's open for information. And I'd like to thank members, and I'll see you all in 1 minute again at the next meeting. But thank you, members, for today. The meeting's now closed.